Are you sure you're ready for this, Magnolia? The question echoed through the phone as Magnolia Rosenberg adjusted her navy blazer for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held her cell phone between her shoulder and ear. Ready? Of course I'm not ready. Who's ever ready to present a project that could either save or completely sink a 3-generation family business? She replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. On the other end of the line, her best friend Dahlia sighed dramatically. Maggie, you've spent the last 6 months living, breathing, and dreaming about this urban revitalization project. If anyone can convince the Pemberton Holdings board to invest $15 million in your crazy plan to transform that abandoned city block into a cultural center, it's you. Magnolia looked at herself in the Grandview Plaza Hotel elevator mirror, tucking back a rebellious strand of her reddish-brown hair. At 28, she had dedicated her career to projects that combined sustainable architecture with positive social impact. This was her moment. The problem isn't my competence, Dahlia. The problem is that half the board has already decided I'm too young, the other half thinks my project is too utopian, and all of them would rather invest in another soulless shopping mall. That's exactly why you're going to crush it. Your passion is contagious, remember? That's how you got the city to donate the land. That's how you convinced 5 different nonprofits to join the project. The elevator stopped on the 23rd floor with a discreet ding. Magnolia took a deep breath. It's showtime. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You need coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. Magnolia laughed, despite her nerves. Dahlia always managed to make her smile, even in the most tense moments. I'll call you after to tell you how it went, if I survive, that is. You're going to do more than survive. You're going to shine. Hanging up the phone, Magnolia walked down the marble corridor toward the conference room. Her medium-heeled sandals made a rhythmic sound against the floor, like a soundtrack to her growing anxiety. The double-glass doors to the conference room were slightly ajar, and she could hear muffled voices inside. She stopped for a moment, organizing her thoughts and notes one last time. 15 minutes, she murmured to herself. 15 minutes to change everything. Pushing the door open with determination, Magnolia entered the room and collided directly with someone rushing out. Her papers flew everywhere like chaotic confetti. Her laptop slipped from her hands and made a worrying noise as it hit the floor. Oh my God, sorry, I didn't see that you were... She began to apologize, kneeling down to collect her scattered documents. Watch where you're going, you clumsy idiot. The male voice cut through the air with irritation. Some people have important appointments here. Magnolia looked up, still kneeling on the floor, and met the most intensely green eyes she had ever seen. The man in front of her was tall, had slightly disheveled dark hair, and wore a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. But what caught her attention the most was his expression of absolute disdain. Sorry, I really didn't see that you were leaving. She tried again, standing up with dignity while holding her crumpled papers. Of course you didn't see. People like you never pay attention to anything but your own insignificant problems. The room had gone completely silent. Magnolia could feel all eyes fixed on them, and her face began to heat up. People like you? Who did this arrogant jerk think he was? People like me? She repeated, her voice rising a few octaves. And what kind of person am I exactly? He looked her up and down with a condescending smile that made Magnolia's blood boil. The kind that shows up in places where they clearly don't belong, bothering people who actually have important matters to handle. It was as if someone had thrown gasoline on a fire. All the nerves, all the anxiety, all the frustration from months of work transformed into incandescent fury. Without thinking, without calculating, without even breathing, Magnolia's hand flew through the air. Slap. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening. The man brought his hand to his face, his green eyes wide with shock. For a moment, no one moved. Magnolia could hear only her own heavy breathing and the distant sound of the air conditioning. You hit me, he said, incredulous. And I'd do it again, Magnolia responded, surprising herself with her own audacity. Nobody has the right to talk to me like that, no matter how important you think you are. That's when she heard a discreet throat clearing behind her. Ahem. Miss Rosenberg? She turned slowly. A middle-aged man, bald and wearing glasses, was watching her with an expression somewhere between amusement and horror. Yes? I'm Herbert Whitman, chairman of the Pemberton Holdings Board. This is our conference room, and, well, this is Aurelius Pemberton, our CEO. The world stopped. The air left Magnolia's lungs as if someone had punched her stomach. She turned slowly to look again at the man she had just slapped. Aurelius Pemberton, the CEO of the company that could finance her project. The 30-year-old man who had transformed the family business into a real estate empire. The man who decided the fate of million-dollar projects. The man she had just slapped in the face in front of the entire board. "Oh," was all she managed to say, her voice coming out as a strangled whisper. Aurelius still had his hand on his face, but now there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't just shock anymore, there was curiosity, amusement. "Well," he said slowly, lowering his hand and revealing a red mark on his right cheek. "This is definitely a memorable first impression." The entire board watched the scene like people watching a car accident in slow motion. Magnolia could feel her professional career crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. I can explain," she stammered. "Oh, please explain," Aurelius said, crossing his arms. "I'm eager to hear how you justify physically assaulting someone you just met. You insulted me, you called me clumsy, said I don't belong here, that my problems are insignificant, and that justifies violence?" Magnolia opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. No, it didn't justify it. She knew that. Everyone knew that. "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't justify it." "Right. So you admit that you committed assault against the CEO of the company you came to make a presentation to?" Yes. "Perfect. Herbert, can we cancel the meeting? Apparently today's presenter has some impulse control issues that need to be resolved before we can trust $15 million to her." And just like that, in less than 5 minutes, Magnolia Rosenberg's life project turned to dust. But as she gathered her belongings under the silent gaze of the entire board, a small rebellious part of her mind couldn't stop thinking that the slap had sounded really satisfying, even if it had just destroyed everything. The elevator ride down felt like descending into the 9th circle of professional hell. Magnolia stared at her distorted reflection in the polished steel doors, watching her career aspirations shrink with each passing floor. Ding. 22nd floor. Her phone buzzed. Ding. 15th floor. Another buzz. By the time she reached the lobby, her phone had lit up like a Christmas tree. 7 missed calls from Dahlia, 3 from her business partner Charlotte, and 2 from unknown numbers that were probably reporters, because apparently slapping a billionaire CEO was newsworthy. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The concierge's voice was gentle, concerned. "You look a bit pale." Magnolia glanced at herself in the lobby's massive mirror. Pale didn't begin to cover it. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, wrestled with it, and lost spectacularly. I need some air," she managed. "Of course. The Terrace Cafe is lovely this time of day." She nodded gratefully and stumbled toward the glass doors leading outside. The October Manhattan breeze hit her face like a wake-up call. She found an empty table at the far corner of the terrace and finally answered her phone. "Magnolia Elizabeth Rosenberg, what the hell? Dahlia, please, I can explain." "Explain? Explain? Charlotte just called me screaming something about you assaulting a CEO? Please tell me this is some kind of elaborate joke." Magnolia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. "I wish it were. Oh my God. Oh my God, what happened? And start from the beginning because I'm completely lost here." Taking a shaky breath, Magnolia recounted the entire disaster. With each detail, she could practically hear Dahlia's jaw dropping further. "So let me get this straight," Dahlia said when she finished. "You slapped Aurelius Pemberton, the Aurelius Pemberton, the guy who's been on the cover of Forbes 3 times, the guy who owns half of Lower Manhattan. That's him." In front of his entire board of directors. Yep, because he called you clumsy. He also said I didn't belong there, and that my problems were insignificant. Maggie, honey, I love you, but you literally crashed into him and made him drop whatever he was carrying. The truth hit like a second slap. Magnolia groaned and put her head in her hands. Oh God, you're right. I was the clumsy one. I was nervous and not paying attention, and I completely bulldozed into him, and then when he called me out on it, She made a frustrated noise. I destroyed everything, didn't I? Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but yes, pretty much. What am I going to do, Dahlia? This project isn't just about me. There are 5 non-profit organizations counting on this funding. There are families in that neighborhood who need the community center, kids who need the after-school programs, seniors who need the health clinic. Breathe, Maggie, just breathe, maybe. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. But it was. Magnolia's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Pemberton Holdings has decided to pass on the Riverside Cultural Center project. Thank you for your interest. H. Whitman. She showed the text to her phone camera so Dahlia could see. Oh, sweetie. It's over. 6 months of work, gone. The community outreach, the architectural plans, the environmental impact studies, the partnerships, all of it gone because I couldn't control my temper for 30 seconds. Hey, don't you dare blame yourself entirely. That guy was a complete jerk to you. Yeah, you shouldn't have hit him, but he shouldn't have talked to you like that either. Magnolia was about to respond when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to find a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer handbag that probably cost more than Magnolia's car. Excuse me, but you're Magnolia Rosenberg, aren't you? The woman's smile was sharp as a knife. I'm Patricia Sinclair from the Manhattan Social Register. I was hoping we could chat about your encounter with Mr. Pemberton this morning. No comment, Magnolia said quickly, standing up. Oh, come now. Surely you want to share your side of the story? I understand you're some sort of activist architect. This could be great publicity for your cause. I said no comment. Magnolia grabbed her bag and headed for the elevator. Dahlia, I have to go. Vultures are already circling. Where are you going? Home. To hide under my covers and pretend this day never happened. But as the elevator doors closed, Magnolia caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror again. This time, she didn't just see a woman who'd made a catastrophic mistake. She saw someone who'd stood up for herself when faced with condescension and arrogance. The slap had been wrong, yes. But the impulse behind it? Maybe that had been exactly right. Her phone buzzed one more time. This message was from a different unknown number, and it made her heart skip. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central Park, Shakespeare Garden. Come alone. A.P. Aurelius Pemberton wanted to see her again. Magnolia stared at the message, her mind racing. Was this her chance to apologize properly? To maybe salvage something from the wreckage? Or was he planning to have her arrested for assault? Only one way to find out. She typed back, I'll be there. The response came immediately. Good. And Miss Rosenberg? Bring your project proposal. All of it. For the first time in hours, Magnolia smiled. Maybe, just maybe, this disaster wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just the beginning. Magnolia had been awake since 4 a.m., staring at her ceiling and rehearsing apologies. By 6 a.m., she'd practiced 17 different versions of, I'm sorry I assaulted you. By 8 a.m., she'd changed outfits 4 times, settling on a professional but not trying too hard navy dress that said, I'm stable and trustworthy, rather than, I have violent tendencies. The Shakespeare Garden in Central Park was mercifully quiet at 9:45 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Magnolia clutched her leather portfolio containing every document, blueprint, and financial projection related to the Riverside Cultural Center project. If this was her one shot at redemption, she was going to be prepared. She chose a bench near the bronze plaque of Hamlet's to be or not to be soliloquy. How fitting. At exactly 10 a.m., she heard footsteps on the gravel path. Aurelius Pemberton approached wearing dark jeans, a gray sweater, and sunglasses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Without the intimidating business suit, he looked younger, more approachable. The red mark on his cheek had faded to a barely visible pink line. Miss Rosenberg. He sat down beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Thank you for coming. Mr. Pemberton, Before you say anything, he interrupted, raising a hand. I owe you an apology. Magnolia blinked. This was not how she'd imagined this conversation starting. I was incredibly rude to you yesterday. Unforgivably rude. I'd had a particularly frustrating morning. My ex-fiancé had just ambushed me in the hallway with wedding planners in tow, demanding to know why I'd ruined everything by calling off our engagement last month. I was stressed, angry, and looking for someone to take it out on. He removed his sunglasses, and she was struck again by those impossibly green eyes. You happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That doesn't excuse what I did. I shouldn't have hit you no matter what you said. No, you shouldn't have. His mouth twitched into what might have been a smile. But I have to admit, it's been a while since anyone's called me out on my behavior so directly. They sat in silence for a moment, watching a jogger pass by with her golden retriever. I looked into your project after you left, Aurelius said finally. The Riverside Cultural Center. It's ambitious. Magnolia's heart leaped. You read the proposal? Every word. Including the letters of support from the community, the partnership agreements with local nonprofits, and the environmental sustainability plans. He turned to face her fully. It's brilliant, Miss Rosenberg. Absolutely brilliant. But your board, my board makes decisions based on traditional profit margins and safe investments. They see a rundown neighborhood and think liability. They see community programs and think money pit. He paused. But I see what you see. Potential. Hope. A chance to actually make a difference instead of just making money. Magnolia felt tears prick her eyes. So you'll reconsider the funding? I'll do better than that. I'll personally guarantee the investment. $15 million, just as you requested. With one condition. Her heart stopped. There was always a condition. I want to be involved. Not as a silent investor, but as an active partner. I have connections, resources, and frankly, I'm tired of building soulless glass towers that do nothing but add zeros to bank accounts. You want to work with me after I slapped you? Aurelius laughed, a genuine warm sound that transformed his entire face. Miss Rosenberg, you're the first person in years who's treated me like a human being instead of a walking checkbook. Granted, the treatment was violent, but it was honest. Magnolia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Why would you trust me with your money after yesterday? Because yesterday, you showed me exactly who you are. You're passionate about your work. You fight for what you believe in, and you don't back down when faced with intimidation. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone I meet either wants something from me or is afraid of me. You're the first person who's ever slapped me for being an ass. Please don't make that sound like a good thing. Maybe it is a good thing. Maybe I needed someone to knock some sense into me, literally. A smile tugged at the corners of Magnolia's mouth despite herself. Are you sure about this? $15 million is a lot of money to invest based on one conversation. Miss Rosenberg, Magnolia, please. Magnolia. The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. I've made billion-dollar decisions with less consideration. At least this one might actually help people. She opened her portfolio and pulled out the architectural renderings. These are the latest designs. The main building would house the community center, with spaces for job training, childcare, and senior activities. The second building would be an art center with studios, a small theater, and exhibition space. And this, she pointed to a detailed drawing, would be a rooftop garden and cafe, completely sustainable, providing fresh produce for the community kitchen. Aurelius studied the drawings intently, his business mask slipping away to reveal genuine enthusiasm. This community kitchen? Tell me more about that. Food insecurity is a major issue in the Riverside neighborhood. 30% of families don't have reliable access to fresh, healthy meals. The community kitchen would serve free breakfast and lunch programs for kids, cooking classes for families, and job training for anyone interested in culinary careers. And the funding model? Grants, donations, and revenue from the cafe and event rentals. I've run the numbers. We can be self-sustaining within 3 years. Impressive. He handed back the drawings. I have one more condition. Magnolia's stomach dropped. What is it? I want you to slap me again if I ever act like that much of an arrogant jerk. She laughed, a real surprised laugh that echoed through the garden. Deal. But can we maybe establish a warning system first? 3 strikes or something? 2 strikes, I'm a quick learner. All right then, Mr. Pemberton. Aurelius. Aurelius. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate somehow. Do we have a partnership? He extended his hand. We have a partnership. As their hands touched, Magnolia felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static. From the way Aurelius's eyes widened slightly, she suspected he felt it too. So, he said, not immediately releasing her hand. When do we start changing the world? How about tomorrow? Perfect, I'll have my lawyers draw up the contracts. As they walked out of the garden together, Magnolia couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the best thing she'd ever done was slap Aurelius Pemberton in the face. 3 weeks into their partnership, Magnolia had learned several important things about Aurelius Pemberton. He took his coffee black, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of building codes, and he looked unfairly attractive when he was concentrating on architectural plans. The last discovery was proving to be a significant workplace hazard. The zoning committee meeting is at 2, Aurelius said, not looking up from the environmental impact report spread across the conference table in his Manhattan office. His dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and Magnolia had to resist the urge to brush it back. Are you ready for their questions about the traffic flow studies? Born ready, she replied, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened when he smiled. I've memorized every statistic from the Transportation Department report. Did you know that the new bus route will actually reduce overall neighborhood traffic by 12%? I do now. He finally looked up, those green eyes twinkling with amusement. You realize most architects would have delegated that level of research to an assistant? Most architects don't care about the people who will actually use their buildings. It was meant to be a casual comment, but something shifted in Aurelius's expression. The professional mask he usually wore slipped, revealing something warmer underneath. You really mean that, don't you? This isn't just a career move for you. Of course I mean it. Magnolia set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. I didn't get into architecture to build monuments to ego. I got into it because buildings shape communities, and communities shape lives. The difference between a neighborhood thriving and deteriorating often comes down to whether people have safe, beautiful spaces to gather. Aurelius was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. What? She asked. I'm just wondering what other assumptions I made about you that were completely wrong. Before she could respond, the office door burst open. A woman in a stunning red dress and stiletto heels that could be classified as weapons strode in without knocking. She had the kind of blonde hair that required professional maintenance and the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Ori, darling, she announced in a voice that carried across 3 time zones. I've been trying to reach you for days. Aurelius's entire body went rigid. Victoria, I thought I made it clear that we were finished. Oh, don't be dramatic. We had a little spat, that's all. Every couple goes through rough patches. Victoria's gaze finally landed on Magnolia, and her smile turned predatory. I don't believe we've met. I'm Victoria Blackwood, Aurelius's fiancée. Ex-fiancée, Aurelius corrected firmly. Victoria, this is Magnolia Rosenberg, my business partner. Business partner. Victoria's laugh was like champagne bubbles, pretty on the surface but with a sharp bite. How quaint. And what business would that be exactly? We're developing a community center in the Riverside district, Magnolia said, standing to offer her hand. Victoria looked at it like it might contain communicable diseases. Community center? Ari, sweetheart, what happened to the luxury resort project in the Hamptons? That was going to be our summer home. That was your dream, not mine, Aurelius said, his voice taking on an edge. And I told you a month ago I'm not interested in projects that serve no purpose beyond making rich people richer. Don't be ridiculous. You're a Pemberton. Making money is what you do, it's who you are. Victoria moved closer to him, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. This little philanthropy phase is adorable, but it's time to come back to reality. Magnolia watched the interaction with growing irritation. The dismissive way Victoria talked about their project, the possessive way she touched Aurelius, the assumption that she could waltz back into his life and take control. It was like watching someone try to clip the wings off a bird. Actually, Magnolia interjected, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, the community center is projected to generate significant long-term revenue while providing essential services to an underserved population. It's both financially sound and socially responsible. Some might call that good business. Victoria turned to her with renewed interest, as if seeing her for the first time. And you are? The architect who's going to prove that profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive. How noble. Victoria's smile could have cut glass. Tell me, Miss Robertson. Rosenberg. Miss Rosenberg, have you ever managed a $15 million project before? Have you? Magnolia shot back. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Aurelia stepped between them before Victoria could respond. This conversation is over, he said firmly. Victoria, I need you to leave, now. But Ori, now. For a moment, Victoria looked like she might argue. Then she smoothed her dress and picked up her designer purse. Fine. But this isn't over, darling. You'll realize soon enough that you're making a mistake. She glanced at Magnolia with barely concealed disdain. People like her don't belong in our world. After she left, the office fell into uncomfortable silence. Aurelius ran his hands through his hair and sank into his chair. I'm sorry about that, he said. Victoria doesn't handle rejection well. People like me don't belong in your world? Magnolia repeated, still processing the insult. She didn't mean... Oh, she meant it. Magnolia began gathering her papers. And maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong in a world where community service is seen as a phase and helping people is considered quaint. Magnolia, wait. Aurelia stood quickly. Victoria doesn't speak for me, or my world. Doesn't she? She seemed to know you pretty well. The Hamptons resort, the assumption that making money is all you care about. That was the old me, the me I was before. He stopped abruptly. Before what? Before someone slapped some sense into me. Despite her anger, Magnolia felt a flutter of warmth at his words. Aurelius. I meant what I said in the park. This project matters to me. You matter to me. His eyes met hers, and the honesty there took her breath away. Not as a business partner, as a person who made me remember why I wanted to build things in the first place. The air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she'd hung the stars. The zoning committee meeting, she said weakly, can wait 5 minutes. He stepped closer. I need you to know that Victoria is my past. This, he gestured between them. This is my future. Before she could respond, his phone rang. The spell broke, and they both stepped back, breathing hard. Pemberton Holdings, he answered, his voice slightly rough. Yes, we'll be there at 2. He hung up and looked at her, regret clear on his face. Ready to go change some minds about community development? Always, she said, surprised at how normal her voice sounded when her heart was beating like a hummingbird's wings. But as they gathered their materials and headed for the door, Magnolia couldn't shake Victoria's words. People like her didn't belong in his world. The question was, did he belong in hers? The zoning committee meeting had been a triumph. 3 hours of presentations, questions, and bureaucratic scrutiny had culminated in unanimous approval for the Riverside Cultural Center. Magnolia should have been celebrating, but instead, she found herself sitting in a dive bar in Queens at 8 p.m., staring into a glass of wine and replaying Victoria's words on an endless loop. People like her don't belong in our world. You know, most people celebrate after getting a $15 million project approved, said a familiar voice behind her. Magnolia turned to find Aurelius sliding into the booth across from her. He'd traded his expensive suit for jeans and a worn leather jacket, and somehow looked even more attractive for it. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Dahlia. She's worried about you. Said you've been answering her text with one-word responses, which is apparently a sign of the apocalypse." Despite everything, Magnolia smiled. "She's not wrong. I'm usually incapable of brief communication." "So I've noticed." He signaled the bartender for a beer. "Want to talk about what's really bothering you? Because I don't think it's the zoning approval." Magnolia took a sip of her wine, buying time. The bar was exactly the kind of place she felt comfortable in: dim lighting, mismatched furniture, and a clientele that included construction workers, teachers, and struggling artists. It was real, unpretentious, the opposite of Aurelius's world. "Your ex-fiancé made some valid points today," she said finally. Victoria made exactly 0 valid points about anything, ever. It's one of her most consistent qualities. She said, "I don't belong in your world," and she's right, isn't she? I mean, look at us. She gestured around the bar. "I had to drag you to Queens just to feel like I could breathe again." Aurelius was quiet for a moment, his green eyes studying her face. "You want to know why I proposed to Victoria?" The question caught her off guard. "That's not really my business." She was safe. Expected. Dating Victoria Blackwood made sense on paper, same social circle, same background, same priorities. My parents approved, the board approved, society columnists approved. He took a long drink of his beer. "I was 28 years old, and I'd never made a single decision that wasn't calculated for maximum strategic advantage." "That sounds exhausting." It was. And the worst part? I was good at it. Being the perfect Pemberton heir, making the sensible choices, building the empire. He leaned forward. "But I was miserable, Magnolia. Completely, utterly miserable." "So what changed?" His mouth curved into that half-smile she was growing dangerously fond of. "Someone slapped me and told me I was an arrogant ass." That someone was right about the arrogant part. She was right about a lot of things, including the fact that I'd forgotten who I wanted to be underneath all the expectations. He reached across the table and touched her hand. "You asked if you belong in my world. Wrong question. What's the right question? Do I want to belong in yours?" The simple touch of his fingers on hers sent electricity shooting up her arm. She looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, bearing a small scar across the knuckles that made her wonder what story it told. "And do you?" she asked quietly. "I've spent the last 3 weeks working harder and feeling more fulfilled than I have in years. I've laughed more, argued more, and cared more about the outcome of a single project than I have about anything in my entire career." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "So yes, Magnolia, I want to belong in your world. The question is whether you'll let me." Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message, then another, and another. "Sorry," she said, pulling away to check her phone. "It's probably Dahlia wondering if I'm—" She stopped. The blood drained from her face. "What is it?" "It's from the community liaison at Riverside, Mrs. Chen." Magnolia's voice was barely a whisper. "There's been an accident at the construction site, a gas line explosion." Aurelius was on his feet immediately. "Is anyone hurt?" "2 workers are in the hospital, and—" She looked up at him, tears threatening. "The old community building that was supposed to be renovated as part of Phase 2? It's gone. Completely destroyed." Okay. We can handle this." Aurelius was already pulling out his phone. "I'll call my insurance people, we'll assess the damage, figure out what we need to—" "You don't understand." Magnolia stood shakily. "That building housed the neighborhood's only after-school program. 60 kids had nowhere to go today. Their parents couldn't leave work to pick them up, so they're all crowded into Mrs. Chen's apartment, which violates about 12 different safety codes. The magnitude of the disaster hit her fully. This wasn't just about construction delays or insurance claims. This was about families, about children who depended on that program, about a community that had trusted her to make their lives better, not worse. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have insisted on more thorough soil surveys, should have demanded the gas company mark every line twice." "Hey!" Aurelius's hands were on her shoulders, steady and warm. "This is not your fault. Accidents happen, even with the best planning. Tell that to the 60 kids who have nowhere safe to go after school. So we'll figure out somewhere else for them to go, tonight." She looked at him, this man who 3 weeks ago had been a complete stranger, who came from a world of luxury and privilege that she'd never understand. "We? Did you really think I was going to let you handle this alone?" And just like that, Victoria's words lost their power. Because standing in a dive bar in Queens watching Aurelius Pemberton roll up his sleeves to help solve problems for kids he'd never met, Magnolia realized that belonging wasn't about which world you came from. It was about which world you chose to build. "I know someone who might help," she said. "Father Murphy at St. Catherine's has a gymnasium and a kitchen. If we can convince him to let us use the space temporarily, consider it done. What else do we need? Volunteers to supervise, supplies for activities, probably liability insurance. I'll handle the insurance. You handle Father Murphy." And Magnolia. "Yeah? Next time you want to celebrate in a dive bar in Queens, I'm buying the first round." For the first time all day, she laughed, a real genuine laugh that made her chest feel lighter. "Deal, but I'm warning you, I have terrible taste in bars. I'm sure I'll manage." As they headed out into the night to solve problems and save the day, Magnolia couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who belonged in any world she wanted to build, even if it started with a slap. 48 hours later, St. Catherine's Gymnasium had been transformed into the most organized chaos Magnolia had ever seen. 60 children ranging from 6 to 14 were scattered across the space, some working on homework at folding tables, others engaged in an impromptu soccer game, and a group of teenagers teaching origami to the younger kids. "Miss Magnolia!" 8-year-old Sophia bounded over, clutching a paper crane. "Look what Maya taught me. She says if you make 1,000 of them, your wish comes true." "That's beautiful, sweetheart. What would you wish for?" "That our real center gets built super fast so we don't have to share the bathroom with the church ladies' quilting circle anymore." Magnolia laughed, ruffling Sophia's dark curls. "We're working on it, I promise." Across the room, Aurelius was crouched down, listening intently to 10-year-old Marcus explain the finer points of Pokemon card trading. Watching him, this billionaire CEO who probably had 3 board meetings and a charity gala to attend, give his complete attention to a 4th grader's collection was doing dangerous things to Magnolia's heart. "He's a keeper," said a voice behind her. Magnolia turned to find Mrs. Chen approaching with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing smile. Elena Chen was 72 years old, had raised 5 children and fostered 12 more, and had been the unofficial mayor of the Riverside neighborhood for 2 decades. She also had radar for romantic tension that could probably detect feelings from space. "He's my business partner," Magnolia said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Mrs. Chen's tone suggested she wasn't buying that for a second. Business partners don't usually spend their own money on pizza parties for 60 kids. He spent his own money. "Honey, did you think the pizza fairy was feeling generous? That man has been covering expenses left and right, the liability insurance for this space, the art supplies, the snacks. Yesterday I caught him on the phone arranging for a mobile library to come twice a week." Magnolia stared across the room where Aurelius was now helping Marcus organize his Pokemon cards by evolution stage. "He didn't tell me any of that. Good men don't usually advertise their good deeds. They just do them." Mrs. Chen sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "You know, I've been in this neighborhood a long time. Seen a lot of developers come through with big promises and fancy presentations. Most of them disappear the minute things get complicated. And that man has been here every day since the explosion. rolling up his sleeves, solving problems, learning every kid's name. That's not business, sweetheart. That's heart. Before Magnolia could respond, the gymnasium door opened and Victoria Blackwood walked in like she was entering a photo shoot. She wore a white designer coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary and stepped carefully around the children's backpacks scattered on the floor. "Ori," she called out, her voice carrying across the room. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The entire room went quiet. 60 kids, a dozen volunteers, and Father Murphy all turned to stare at the woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine ad. Aurelius stood slowly, his expression hardening. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? The question is, what are you doing here? This is—" She looked around the gymnasium with barely concealed disgust. "Darling, this is beneath you." "These children are not beneath anyone," Magnolia said, stepping forward. Several of the older kids had moved protectively closer to the younger ones as if sensing the negative energy Victoria brought with her. "Of course not," Victoria said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure they're all very sweet. But Ori, you've been playing charity worker for days now. Don't you think it's time to come back to reality?" "This is my reality," Aurelius said firmly. "And if you can't respect that—" "Your reality?" Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and out of place among the children's artwork hanging on the walls. "Darling, your reality is board meetings and business deals and society galas. Your reality is the penthouse apartment you bought us, the yacht you had commissioned, the life we were building together." "The life you were building," he corrected. "I never wanted any of that." "Don't be ridiculous, of course you did. You're a Pemberton. It's in your blood." Victoria's voice was rising and some of the younger children were starting to look scared. Magnolia stepped between them. "Victoria, there are children here. Could you please keep your voice down?" "Don't you dare tell me what to do," Victoria snapped. "I don't know what kind of spell you've cast over him, but this little fantasy is over. Ori, you're coming with me. Now." "No," Aurelius said quietly. "I'm not." "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not going with you, Victoria. Not now, not ever. We're finished. We've been finished since the moment you made it clear that my feelings and choices don't matter to you." Victoria's perfect composure cracked. "You can't be serious. You're choosing this—" She gestured wildly around the gymnasium. "Over everything we had? I'm choosing the person I want to be over the person you wanted me to be." The silence that followed was broken by a small voice. "Mr. Aurelius?" It was Sophia, tugging on his sleeve. "Are you okay? You look sad." Aurelius knelt down to Sophia's eye level, his expression softening completely. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Thank you for asking. Is that lady making you upset? Because Mrs. Chen says when people make you upset, you should tell them to go away." "Out of the mouths of babes." Magnolia bit back a smile. "You know what, Sophia? Mrs. Chen is absolutely right." Aurelius stood and looked directly at Victoria. "You need to leave. Now." "This isn't over," Victoria said, her voice cold as ice. "You think this little community project is going to last? You think she actually cares about you, or is she just using you for your money?" The accusation hit Magnolia like a physical blow. Around the room, she could see the volunteers and older kids watching, absorbing every word. "That's enough," Aurelius said, his voice dangerous. "Get out. Now, before I call security." "Security?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "At a church gymnasium? Really, Ori, this is what you've become?" "This is who I've always been," he said. "I just finally found someone who helped me remember." His eyes met Magnolia's across the room, and the look in them made her breath catch. It wasn't just gratitude or partnership or even attraction. It was something deeper, more profound. It was love. Victoria saw it too. Her face went white with fury. "Fine," she said. "Enjoy your little charity case. But when this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crawling back to me." She turned on her designer heels and stalked out, the door slamming behind her with a bang that echoed through the gymnasium. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus spoke up. "Mr. Aurelius, is she gone for good?" "Yeah, buddy, she's gone for good." "Good," Sophia piped up. She was mean, and her shoes were too pointy. The laughter that followed broke the tension, and soon the gymnasium was back to its usual organized chaos. But as Magnolia watched Aurelius return to his Pokemon discussion with Marcus, she couldn't shake Victoria's words. Was she just using him for his money? Was this whole thing going to fall apart? And most terrifying of all, what would happen if it did? 2 weeks after Victoria's dramatic exit, the Riverside Cultural Center construction was back on track. The new after-school program at St. Catherine's was thriving. The community garden was sprouting its first vegetables, and the local newspapers had written 3 glowing articles about the project. Everything should have been perfect. Instead, Magnolia found herself sitting in her apartment at 2 a.m., staring at financial reports and feeling like a fraud. The numbers didn't lie. Aurelius had quietly covered nearly $200,000 in unexpected expenses, the temporary relocation costs, the upgraded safety measures, the community programming that wasn't technically part of the original budget. He'd done it without fanfare, without asking for recognition, without even telling her, which made Victoria's accusation echo even louder in her mind. Is she just using you for your money? Her laptop chimed with an email. From Aurelius, sent 15 minutes ago. Maggie. Thought you'd want to see this. The mayor's office wants to feature our project in their annual urban development showcase. Apparently we're setting a new standard for community-centered design. Pretty amazing what we've built together. A.P.S. Stop working so late. I can see your apartment lights from my office, and it's after 2 a.m. Magnolia looked out her window. Across the city, she could just make out the Pemberton Holdings building, its top floors still gleaming with light. He was working late too, probably dealing with the dozen other major projects that actually made his company money. Her phone rang. Aurelius. You weren't kidding about seeing my lights, she said instead of hello. Couldn't sleep. Figured you couldn't either. His voice was warm, tired. Want to talk about what's been bothering you for the past 2 weeks? Nothing's bothering me. The project is going great. The project is. You, on the other hand, have been avoiding me since the Victoria incident. You barely made eye contact during yesterday's site visit, and you've been sending me formal emails instead of your usual novels full of enthusiastic, parenthetical observations. She'd forgotten how observant he was. I've been busy. Magnolia. The way he said her name, patient, but not buying her excuse, made her chest tight. Talk to me. She closed her laptop and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Do you know how much extra money you've spent on this project? There was a pause. Is that what this is about? You've covered nearly $200,000 in costs that weren't your responsibility. The insurance gaps, the community programming, the temporary facilities. So? So? She turned away from the window, frustration bubbling up. So Victoria was right. I am using you for your money. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Is it? Really look at this situation, Aurelius. I'm a struggling architect who somehow convinced a billionaire to fund her dream project. And when things got complicated and expensive, you just fixed it with your checkbook. Because I wanted to. Because I believe in what we're doing. But what am I bringing to this partnership besides good intentions and architectural plans? You're the one with the connections, the resources, the ability to actually make things happen. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Is that really what you think? That you're not contributing? I think I'm an idealistic architect who got in over her head and accidentally seduced a billionaire into bankrolling her fantasy. Seduced? Despite everything, she could hear the smile in his voice. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. Because from where I'm sitting, you're the person who designed a community center that's going to serve thousands of people for decades. You're the person who convinced 5 different nonprofits to work together for the first time in their history. You're the person who got the city to donate land that had been tied up in bureaucratic red tape for 8 years. Aurelius. You're also the person who sits on the floor of a church gymnasium helping kids with homework every afternoon. Who knows every volunteer's name and remembers that Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter is applying to college and asks about Marcus's mom's job interview. Magnolia sank onto her couch, unexpected tears pricking her eyes. And, he continued, his voice growing more intense, you're the person who made me remember that money is just a tool. That the point isn't to accumulate it, it's to use it for something that matters. But Victoria wasn't entirely wrong. This relationship, partnership, whatever this is, it's not exactly balanced. You're right, it's not balanced. Her heart sank. I'm getting way more out of it than you are. What? Magnolia, I've spent my entire adult life building things that make rich people richer. Shopping malls, luxury condos, office buildings that house companies I don't care about. Do you know what that does to your soul after a while? She was quiet, listening. Then you came along. This fierce, passionate woman who slapped me for being an ass, and then proceeded to show me what it looks like to build something that actually matters. You gave me purpose, Magnolia. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning that had nothing to do with profit margins or stock prices. Aurelius, I'm not bankrolling your fantasy. You're not using me for my money. We're building something together, something neither of us could create alone. That's what partnership means. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of this being too good to be true. Of you waking up one day and realizing you could be building yacht clubs for billionaires instead of community centers for kids who can barely afford school supplies. Of you remembering that you're Aurelius Pemberton and I'm just me. The line was quiet for so long she wondered if he'd hung up. Can you see my office from your window? He asked finally. Yes. Look at it now. She walked back to the window. As she watched, the lights in his office went out, floor by floor, until only one remained lit. What looked like a conference room on the top floor. Her phone buzzed with a text. Look closer. Squinting, she could just make out a figure in the lit window. As she watched, the figure held up what looked like a large piece of paper. Another text. Can you see it? She grabbed the binoculars she kept for bird watching from her fire escape. Through the lenses, she could see Aurelius standing in his conference room, holding a huge piece of poster board with black marker letters that read, I choose you. Despite her tears, despite her fears, despite everything, Magnolia started laughing. Her phone rang again. Did you see it? He asked. I saw it. Very smooth, billionaire boy, very romantic. I have my moments. Now will you please stop torturing yourself with spreadsheets and get some sleep? Only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if you ever change your mind about the project, about this, about us, you'll tell me. Don't just disappear into your old life and leave me wondering what I did wrong. Magnolia. His voice was impossibly gentle. I promise you that's never going to happen. But if it ever did, it wouldn't be because you did anything wrong. It would be because I'm an idiot who forgot the best thing that ever happened to him was getting slapped by a beautiful architect in a hotel conference room. I love you, she said before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air between them, surprising them both. Good, he said softly. Because I've been in love with you since approximately 30 seconds after you hit me. That's ridiculous. Probably. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. As they said goodnight and hung up, Magnolia looked out at the city lights and realized that sometimes the scariest thing about dreams coming true isn't that they might fail, it's that they might succeed beyond your wildest imagination. 6 months later, the Riverside Cultural Center stood like a beacon of hope on what had once been an abandoned city block. The morning sun caught the solar panels on the rooftop garden, where tomatoes and lettuce grew in neat rows tended by neighborhood kids. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Magnolia could see families already gathering for the grand opening celebration. Nervous, Aurelius asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Terrified, she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. What if nobody comes? What if they come but hate it? What if the sound system fails during the ceremony? What if it's absolutely perfect and everyone loves it and you finally accept that you've created something amazing? She looked at him, this man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word, and felt her anxiety settle into manageable excitement. He was right. They'd built something extraordinary together. Did you see the article in the Times this morning? He asked. The one calling this a revolutionary model for community-centered development? That's the one. They interviewed Mrs. Chen. She said, and I quote, "Miss Magnolia and Mr. Aurelius didn't just build us a building, they built us a future." Magnolia felt tears prick her eyes. She's been like a grandmother to me through all this. Speaking of grandmothers, Aurelius nodded toward the entrance, where a familiar figure in an elegant burgundy coat was walking through the doors. My grandmother is here. Your grandmother? The Eleanor Pemberton? The one who sits on half the charity boards in Manhattan? The very one. She's been dying to meet the woman who, in her words, finally knocked some sense into my stubborn grandson. Before Magnolia could panic properly, a regal woman in her 70s approached them. Eleanor Pemberton had silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, and eyes the same striking green as her grandson's. So, she said, extending a gloved hand to Magnolia, you're the young woman who slapped my grandson. Yes, ma'am. I'm very sorry about— Don't apologize, dear. Best thing that ever happened to him. Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. Though I do hope you've found less violent ways to communicate since then. We're working on it, Aurelius said dryly. Good. Now show me this center you two have built. I want to see what's gotten my grandson to stop talking about profit margins and start talking about playground equipment. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of ribbon cuttings, speeches, and tours. The mayor spoke about urban renewal. The head of the Children's Services Department talked about community partnerships. Local news cameras captured families exploring the art studios, teenagers trying out the recording booth in the music room, and seniors attending their first chair yoga class in the wellness center. But Magnolia's favorite moment came when Sophia, now 9 and missing 2 front teeth, grabbed the microphone during the open mic portion of the ceremony. I want to say thank you to Miss Magnolia and Mr. Aurelius, she announced to the crowd of 200 people. Before they built this place, I had to do my homework at McDonald's because it was the only place with Wi-Fi and tables. Now I have the best homework spot in the world, and also they have really good cookies in the cafe. The laughter and applause that followed made Magnolia's heart swell to bursting. As the afternoon wound down and the crowds began to thin, Magnolia found herself alone in the main lobby, looking up at the wall where they'd mounted photos from the construction process. There was one of her covered in dust after a particularly messy day of electrical work. Another of Aurelius teaching Marcus how to use a level. One of the whole construction crew celebrating when they'd installed the last solar panel. Admiring your handiwork? Dahlia appeared beside her, looking elegant in a blue dress and heels that she'd complained about all day. I still can't believe it's real, Magnolia said. 6 months ago, this was just drawings and dreams. And a very dramatic slap, Dahlia added. Speaking of which, where's your billionaire boyfriend? I barely got to embarrass him with childhood stories about you. He's around somewhere, probably discussing construction details with Mrs. Chen. You know how they get when they start talking about building codes. Dahlia gave her a knowing look. You realize he's going to propose soon, right? What? That's ridiculous. We haven't even— Magnolia, the man had a custom jewelry box delivered to his office yesterday. My friend Sarah works in the building and she saw him meeting with someone from Cartier. Before Magnolia could process this information fully, the lights in the lobby dimmed. Confused voices murmured as people looked around. Then Aurelius's voice came over the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just one more moment. A spotlight appeared. Apparently, they'd installed theatrical lighting she didn't know about, illuminating the center of the lobby where Aurelius stood in his best suit. 6 months ago, I met someone in this very spot. Well, technically in a hotel conference room, but the spirit of meeting stands. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. That meeting didn't go exactly as planned. "You got slapped," Marcus called out from the audience, earning more laughter. "I did get slapped," Aurelius agreed. "And it was the luckiest moment of my life." Magnolia's heart started beating faster. Magnolia Rosenberg taught me that buildings aren't just about architecture. They're about dreams, about community, about creating spaces where people can become the best versions of themselves. He looked directly at her. "She also taught me that the best partnerships happen when two people build something together that neither could create alone." He reached into his jacket pocket. "Oh my God," Dahlia whispered. "Magnolia," Aurelius said, walking toward her, "you've already changed my life completely. You've made me a better man, a better partner, and hopefully someday a better father to the kids we'll teach to play in that playground we designed together." He dropped to one knee in the center of the lobby, and Magnolia heard several people gasp. Sophia squealed with excitement. "I love your passion for making the world better. I love how you remember everyone's birthday and still get paint in your hair when you're really focused on a project. I love that you slapped me when I was being an ass. And I love that you've never let me forget where I came from or where I want to go." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and perfectly suited to someone who spent her days on construction sites. "Magnolia Elizabeth Rosenberg, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life building dreams with you?" The lobby was completely silent, except for the sound of Magnolia's heartbeat in her ears. "Only if you promise me something," she said finally. "Anything. Promise me that if I ever get too full of myself, you'll remind me that this all started because I couldn't watch where I was going in a hotel hallway." "Deal," he said, grinning. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." The cheer that went up from the crowd was loud enough to shake the solar panels. As Aurelia slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her in front of 200 people, Magnolia couldn't help but laugh. Who would have thought that the best thing she'd ever build would start with the worst first impression she'd ever made? 5 years later, Magnolia Pemberton stood in the conference room of Rosenberg Pemberton Community Development, reviewing plans for their latest project, a sustainable housing complex that would provide affordable homes for 50 families. Through her office window, she could see the Riverside Cultural Center bustling with activity. The after-school program now served 150 kids. The community garden had expanded to take up half a city block. The wellness center had a 6-month waiting list for their senior programs. Mrs. P. Sophia, now 14 and president of the Teen Leadership Council, burst through the door. "Did you see the article? They want to use our model in Seattle." "I saw it," Magnolia said, smiling. "Pretty exciting, right?" "The coolest." "Oh, and Mr. A asked me to tell you that little A is awake from his nap and demanding mama immediately." Magnolia's heart melted at the mention of their 18-month-old son, Alexander, or Little A, as the community had dubbed him. He'd taken his first steps in the center's main lobby and said his first word, "Cookie," in the cafe. She found Aurelius in their office, bouncing a curly-haired toddler who looked exactly like his father, but had his mother's stubborn streak. "There's Mama," Aurelius said softly. "Tell Mama about your very important business meeting with Mrs. Chen." "Mama!" Alexander reached for her with chubby arms. "Cookie." "Of course that's what you want," Magnolia laughed, settling her son on her hip. "Just like your daddy, always thinking with your stomach." "Hey, I resemble that remark," Aurelius said, wrapping his arms around both of them. "How was the Seattle call?" "They want us to consult on 3 projects. Looks like we're going to be traveling more." "The 3 of us?" "The 4 of us, actually." She looked up at him, unable to keep the smile off her face. "I went to the doctor this morning." Aurelius's eyes widened. "Are you due in February?" "Right around the center's 5th anniversary." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Alexander, trapped between them, giggled and clapped his hands. "You know," Aurelius murmured against her lips, "I never did properly thank you for slapping me." "Give me another 5 years," Magnolia said, grinning. "I'll think of something." As they stood there in their office overlooking the community they'd built together, watching the sunset paint the walls gold, Magnolia reflected on how wonderfully unpredictable life could be. Sometimes the best love stories really did start with a slap. The end.